Hey everyone, and welcome to week 2 of the Bookpreneur. This week I read Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. Now, for those of you who don't know who Peter Thiel is, he's actually one of the co-founders of PayPal. So when it comes to startups in the business world, this guy is definitely an expert in his field. He's an engaging writer and an intelligent man, generally speaking, so it was great to see this transfer over into his writing, into what was a great book from start to finish. I think some of the ideas and concepts that he's presented are fundamentals in terms of what you would look for in a team. How do you create critical mass? What are the kind of 7 areas that you need to check off before you go to an investor looking for funding? And also, how do you create a business that's not only going to be viable now, but also 10, 15 years into the future? Because I think one of the mistakes that people make when they get started in business is that they're super excited about their idea right now and how it serves the market now. But how is that going to transfer into a long-term successful business? And he goes through a lot of that in detail, which is really handy. A lot of the information that he gives is fairly common sense, I would suggest, for anyone who's kind of been around the business world for a while. But for those who are just starting out, this information is critical to your success. So I highly recommend you read it if you're just starting out in the startup world or business world. The controversial topics are really what kept my attention throughout this book, in terms of Thiel talking about monopolies as the best business model. He doesn't believe in competition. He thinks if you're going to create a business, you want to avoid competition at all costs. If you're not creating a monopoly, then you need to be 10 times better than anything else that's out there. He encourages people to look at small niche markets as a starting point, really dominate the small market before you move into adjacent markets. He uses examples like Amazon and Facebook to highlight this. So if you think about how Amazon dominated the book market online and then moved into other retailing products, and how Facebook started with Harvard and then moved into the entire world, basically. I like how he uses a lot of real-time examples, and he does use a lot of examples of his own experience in the business world, especially with PayPal, talking about how they were not successful to begin with, and they had to think outside the square by encouraging users to use PayPal by paying them. But then they created critical mass through getting on board with eBay and the top sellers, because back at that time, people were waiting for checks to kind of pass through. And they could create something that was instantaneous. So they had a captive audience from the get-go. And then how exponentially PayPal grew from that. And that was really their platform moving forward. I also like one of the more controversial topics that he talks about again, which is higher education, college and university education, and how it baffles him how you can have some of the smartest minds in the world going to the same schools, learning the same thing to get the same jobs, and how moving forward, if we want to create the world that we need socially and economically, we need to move away from formal education, which is interesting coming from a guy who has a law degree. Some would say that is hypocritical. Some would say that retrospect is a wonderful thing. I agree with him on some levels. I think that there are degrees that probably could be done or made obsolete. And I think that higher education is going to change fundamentally over the next 10, 15 years. I think what people are looking for in attributes and skills in the workplace is changing all the time. And I think if higher education wants to keep up with the masses and really provide a real service and not just be a money-making machine, then they've really got to get with the times. Another topic that Peter Thiel talks about, which I know is always controversial in business, was sales. So he talks about how if you have a great product or a service but you don't know how to sell it, then it's basically worthless. And I have this argument with people all the time about sales. People always talk about how they don't want to sell the product. Well, here's reality 101. You're selling yourself all the time, whether it's to your current employer, your partner, you're in your relationships. Sales is one of those skills that is really underutilized and not made a priority for people starting out in business. Like, people focus on branding and all that kind of stuff. It's like, that's great. that you can have a great brand, and it's important, don't get me wrong, but if you can't sell your product, then why would anyone buy into it? Why would anyone buy it, period? So I think it's great that he's touched on that and really emphasized it, because I think it's so important for people starting out to understand that sales is not a bad thing. Sales is such a dirty word in the 21st century. I don't know why, but it's really, when you're getting back to grassroots, what makes a business successful, it's how well people in that business can sell and be passionate about their product. Like I said, I really enjoyed this book, and for that reason, I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars. My only criticism with the book, and hence the reason for the 4 stars, was that it did jump around a lot, and I think the flow of the book was really lacking from start to finish. And I can only put that down to the fact that there was a lot of ideas presented, and Peter Thiel is really leaning on the fact that he's got lecture notes from his series at Stanford that he's used as a basis for this book. So that's probably my only criticism. Next week, I'm reading Lisa Messenger's Daring and Disruptive. I've had a lot of recommendations for this book. Everyone's talking very highly of it. So I'm looking forward to reading about a young, kick-ass female entrepreneur who's done great things in the publishing and book world. So something a little bit different. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about her story and how she got to where she is today. So I will catch you guys next week.